be a part of the show today. Hey, everybody really kind of getting aware of depression and suicide and things that have been going on just after yesterday, or after yesterday's news, or late Monday's news of Robin Williams' death. And unfortunately, this goes on all the time. It happens all the time, and it certainly happens a lot with our military and people that have been a part of this. And just emotional and psychological trauma, all types of things, and there's all types of causes and different things like that. So we thought we would try to delve into this just a little bit, see what we could learn today, see if we couldn't learn a little bit more. And I think it's a good idea that we do that. And so without further ado, we have Stephanie Shannon, who is here with us. She has a website called battlingthestormwithin.com. And by the way, it's Sergeant Shannon. Sarge! Hey, Sarge, what's up?
Hey, I will.
Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Well, everybody was shocked when they hear about somebody we grow up with, Robin Williams. I mean, Mork from Mork, Mrs. Doubtfire. We've seen all the movies, we've watched him, and then we see this tragedy. And obviously, he was a very tormented man. There was no doubt about that, was it?
No, definitely. I think a lot of people assume because, quote unquote, we don't know him personally, but according to his level of success, and he was rich and famous, had people that loved and adored him, was how he sought after that he was happy. And that's not necessarily true. Exterior issues such as money, fame, having a lot of people around you doesn't mean that you have an inner peace within you. And that's what happened to me. I have to share a little bit about my story. Well, I looked at Robin Williams' life, and a lot of people think, oh, he's funny and he's so outgoing. But more or less, sometimes what happens is that when you're a giver, you're always making other people happy, and you're always focused on someone else's happiness, you neglect yourself.
Wow, I never really thought about it like that, but it makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Because I served in the military for 8 years, but also I did social work for 15 years. And I was a community servant, and I gave every day. I worked in child welfare where I gave services to abuse and neglect wards of the court, and those cases were consuming, and it was major issues on the cases. And what I realized was that I was giving so much that I depleted my own resources. I didn't take care of myself.
Wow.
I was undiagnosed. I lived undiagnosed with PTSD for 20 years. I was in the military. I served in the Gulf War, and I experienced MST, military sexual trauma. And at the time, I really didn't think, I got back from the States, and, the war was over, so I went back to school, and life went on as usual, but something was different about me. I was very disconnected. I was estranged from my family. All the goals in a way, I had all the things I had in life, all the goals and things I desired changed. And I wasn't able to communicate that with anybody because I was disconnected. I didn't even understand myself. I didn't know what happened. But I went back to the typical way of living, basically, okay, I know what to do, go to school, you got a good job, you got this and that. And what I did was after all those years of doing that, reaching out to others, going to school, always giving, that I basically was avoiding the pain. I was avoiding what happened to me. I did not want to face it or even admit that I was depressed, clinically depressed. I thought it was just situational. And I think that's what a lot of people think about depression. Oh, it's going to get better, you lost your job, that type of thing. But depression is a very serious condition.
You're listening to Sergeant Stephanie Shannon. She's an author, a speaker, she's a veteran advocate, and she has suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder and many other things, and she's here to talk with us about this today. And hey, if you had a question about yourself, or you may have a question about a family member or a friend, please don't hesitate to call. That's why she's here today, for a few more minutes to visit with us here on a Wednesday. Sarge, how do you know? How would somebody know that they could be teetering with depression, or they could be teetering with some type of mental illness? Are there any signs that a person can, and maybe somebody's listening right now that they just know they just have that empty feeling or that hollow feeling or something, they know something's wrong but they don't know what it is. Is there signs? Is there something people can look for, or maybe in themselves or their family members?
Well, what I would say that they technically determine a chronic condition is something that lasts more than 6 months. So if you had a traumatic experience, like say, for instance, I experienced homelessness, I experienced divorce, I went through a lot of things, and what's happening with me was that I wasn't able to identify these things because I didn't take the time out. So I would say with depression, if you see someone that's they isolate themselves, they're constantly crying, or they seem confused, or disconnected. Those are signs right there. Whenever they speak, and you have to see them like in a negative mode, like mostly all the time. No matter what you do, no matter how much you try to cheer them up, they seem really disconnected. That is one of the major signs, and that's how it was. I was living, even though I was a social worker, I was isolated. I came to work and I gave to all these people, and I went home. And the only thing I would say that kept me alive was my son. I had a child that was dependent upon me, but I think the issue is, too, the negative stigma with being, quote-unquote, mentally ill. When you think of mental illness, you think of these people in a straitjacket. You know what I mean? They have the movies, all these people that are just running around.
In the rubber room there, yeah.
Yeah. It's negative. And I was even told by my supervisor, I turned to her, I said, you know what, I'm really feeling stressed. I was real anxious. I was angry. I was frustrated, and I said, I'm really, not going to even feel it in my body. I felt a lot of things would irritate me, and I would tell her. She said, it's a social worker, you have to take care of yourself. She didn't suggest how, but she told me, don't ever get, treatment. I said, what do you mean? She said, because if you're diagnosed with a mental health treatment, you're not going to get promoted. I said, oh. So, when society, I think the thing is that, okay, we having a mental health diagnosis, it's just like any other medical condition. You got diabetes, if you have, broken leg or whatever it is, you get treatment. I think we have to attach that negative stigma of people being mentally ill to be more or less it's a chemical imbalance. I didn't realize because of the traumatic things that happened that my DNA, I changed, so I think it's very important that we realize these issues that we're facing today is something that we have to take very serious. It don't just go away.
Is depression really, really linked to addiction? I mean, those two seem to go hand in hand. It obviously had a lot to do with Robin Williams. We know he's been battling addiction for a long time. He'd gotten free from it for almost 20 years and then relapsed again. And addiction and depression seem to kind of go together, don't they?
Yeah, they do. A lot of times I call it that's self-medication. Most of the time I know, and a lot of veterans I know, and I'm in a support group right now, and I'm a veteran facilitator here in Flint, Michigan. And most of the people tell me they self-medicate through alcohol, tobacco, and there's not even those substances. You can be a sex addict. You can be be addicted to shopping. You got to go, and you have to, some people spend all their money gambling. I think is identifying anything in excess. Whenever you don't want to face something, you turn to it. Mm-hmm. So instead of me, I think the problem was when I started to talk about my pain, it was so painful. It hurted so much. I don't want to feel it anymore. So what I would do, I would go to work. I was a workaholic, so it made me feel better. And then I'd come back and crash because I was so tired. So yes, I definitely feel that those two go hand in hand. And I believe, like for Robin Williams, I don't know if he was in, if he got diagnosed and was on medication for it or not. It sounds like to me he may have been. We don't know that, but he was definitely self-medicating through alcohol abuse.
Sergeant Stephanie Shannon on the program with us. Talking about depression. You can follow her on Twitter at Battling Storms. Stephanie, does a situation like this and the media and everybody being so aware of what happened with Robin Williams, does it help or kind of hurt those that are battling depression?
I think it helps because what happened to me was when I did reach out for help, I had a lot of negative responses. I had people that told me it was all in my head, the situation, and they minimized it. I think sometimes when we have a celebrity, someone at that level, it kind of brings a higher awareness of something. So I think it's good. I think the awareness, and people looking at it as, oh my God, well, how could that happen? He was so happy. The assumption that people have, the false perception of what depression is. So I think it's a good thing, but I think it's you got to understand on how to help others. You can't become an enabler. I've seen that a lot of times when some people have loved ones that are dealing with depression or mental illness and trying to connect, and I see them always bailing them out. Always jumping into being their savior. That's not a good thing to do. I think it's more or less you have to take that position of setting boundaries and being available to that person. A lot of times I have to say this, when people did come to me and I would say try to help me, I would say create a safe atmosphere for you to help a person, meaning that whatever I tell you, no matter how crazy it sounds, you don't repeat it. Keep it confidential. And then constantly, I may reject you. I may just have been mad and didn't want to talk to you that time. Well, call me again. Call me, text me. I love you, and regardless of what happened, I'm sorry. And I think that's what the issue is, too, is understanding how to help. And I think we have to avoid those things like telling people it's all in their head and, oh, look on the bright side, and, you have so much to live for. Just snap out of it. That's what I was told. What's
like the football coach. It's like the football coach, the kid, he's... it's half his scalp's hanging off. Get up, toughen up. Come on, man.
Get back in there.
Come on, suck it up. Get back out there. But how much? By the way, you're listening to Sergeant Stephanie Shannon. She's an author, speaker, veteran advocate. She has a website here, battlingthestormwithin.com, and you talk about a lot of things that are going on. How much is the power of God and the God Almighty and Jesus play in your life and the way it's turned you around, Sarge? I mean. And I can't tell people, there's no way you can make people understand until they seek it about how it can fulfill you, and there's just it is real. It's so real. People would be just amazed if they would just try to seek it.
Oh, I can tell you this: the only reason I'm still living, God blessed me with a son, and my son gave me the motivation, but it was nothing but the power of God that kept me from committing suicide. I took an overdose of pills. I just wanted to go to sleep and never woke up. But actually shooting myself, I thought about, how would I commit suicide or whatnot. But for some reason, it was always a divine intervention. Right when I was at the point of real serious depression, something would come on the TV or something on the internet, or somebody would say something to me. So I know God had his hand on my life, because I felt like, sometimes I'll ask him, I'm like, why am I still here? I feel like you're torturing me. I said, what I'm going through. I need support. I need real people in my life. But it seemed like all the people that came into my life were takers. And so what he did was, I could truly feel this, that God moved through several means. People, even animals. Sometimes I would be depressed and outside crying, and then a little dog or something would come up, and it just would make me happy. So it was situational for me. So I think it's very important when we talk about God. I don't feel we should totally depend on man. I know that God, there has to be a God. There's no way all the stuff I've been through, and I'm still here, and I still got my scruples. So I think it's important that we look outside of ourselves, that God allowed this to happen. If these things happen to me, he has a solution. And he has to restore me, because his word promises that. So that's what kept me alive, was
Amen.
that I was a prayer warrior. You talking about somebody that can call down the fire of God? I did, because I didn't understand, because no one else could explain what was going on with me. Over time. Yeah.
You sound like a person I would really like to meet in person, just because I can tell. I can tell how far you've come and what you've been able to do, and maybe one day that'll happen. The book is called Battling the Storm Within. Battling the Storm Within.
She needs to come down to Mississippi for some catfish.
Come down and have some catfish.
I was in Tennessee last year. I was in Cordova for a little while. I like it down there. Yeah.
Well, hey, don't let them stereotype the South to you. We're all right down here. We like it a lot.
If you come down here, you might not want to go back.
The book, very quickly, Sarge. We're about to run out of time here. Battling the Storm Within. Is it available through your website, and where else?
Yes, and Amazon.
And Amazon.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, you have a wonderful story.
Okay,
if you'd like to have her maybe speak or do something, check out her website, Battling the Storm Within. It's been a pleasure to visit with you today, and I'm glad
Thank you.
that you're doing what you're doing to help other people. And And it may make people understand that this is okay, and if you suffer from this, you're not alone, and there's help, and you can get better, and that's a good thing. There is hope, and I hope all is well. Hey, thank you again, okay?
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Have a blessed day.
Thank you, Sergeant Stephanie Shannon. Well, you can tell she's a very, very strong woman. Very strong woman. Check out the website. Pretty interesting there. Yeah, you go back and you think about that. You know, when we talked about that yesterday, and I don't want to talk about this anymore today, but I was thinking about this on the way home. After hearing the autopsy results and everything about